The Highlander Folk School had provided training and education for the labor movement in Appalachia and throughout the southern United States. The Highlander Folk School was also home for the Knights of Labor, Clinch River Assembly, number 93. Compared with other southern states, the Knights were not strong in Tennessee. The success the Knights enjoyed in the volunteer state was mainly among coal miners. The first local assembly of the Knights of Labor in Tennessee was formed among the miners of East Tennessee in 1873. Although the Knights of Labor, or the Highland Folk School, was not a union, the two of them were very instrumental in assisting the local coal miners in organizing and forming unions. Coal Creek War was an armed labor uprising that took place primarily in Anderson County in the American state of Tennessee in the early 1890s. The struggle began in 1891 when coal mine owners in the Coal Creek watershed attempted to replace free coal miners with convicts leased out by the state government. The Coal Creek War was part of a greater struggle across Tennessee against the state's controversial convict leasing system, which allowed the state to lease its convicts to mining companies to compete with free labor. On the morning of July 20th, an estimated 2,000 miners, armed with shotguns, rifles, and pistols, surrounded the Briceville Stockade. After seizing the Briceville Stockade, the coal miners sent a telegram to Governor Buchanan stating their actions were taken to defend their property and their wages and asked for his intervention. The governor responded with an armed militia, which resulted in bloodshed. Many miles from the industrial centers of the Northeast and Midwest, and hardly the center of trade union activity, the state capital of Tennessee is not a place one would expect a major union battle to be fought or for a new union to be organized. On October 12th of 1914, garment workers from New York City and Chicago convened at the Duncan Hotel and formed the United Garment Workers Association. A union is born in Nashville. On July 1st, 1933, textile workers at the Harriman Hosiery Mills plant in Harriman, Tennessee, seized the opportunity created by Section 7A of the National Industrial Recovery Act to organize a local union of the hosiery workers, part of the United Textile Workers of America. Over the next year, hundreds of workers, most of them women, in this East Tennessee community became embroiled in a bitter strike against the town's largest employer, which produced nationally marketed women's silk stockings. The strike tore the town apart, divided managers and workers, and revealed the fragile state of labor reform in the early 1930s. The course of this strike suggested that the early New Deal's attempt to provide for real improvement in the lives of ordinary working people through union organization, recognition, and collective bargaining proved to be a missed chance for the textile workers of the South. The Great Depression was hard for coal companies and miners. The companies, which were earning less money, cut wages and cut back on work days. Miners used to working 5 days a week now worked 3 days a week, and they got less pay. In July 1932, when Fentress Coal and Coke cut wages for the third time and fired some union members, the United Mine Workers Union began a strike. The company brought in workers from other areas of the state to work the mines. They were called scabs or strikebreakers by the striking miners. Violence broke out in Wilder, Tennessee. An expensive coal sorting machine went up in flames. A railroad bridge was destroyed by dynamite. Both union and non-union workers were shot at and some were wounded. Tennessee Governor Henry Horton called in the National Guard to restore peace in the city. One of the greatest tests of strength between a labor force and its management took place in the mid-60s in the upper eastern Tennessee city of Kingsport. In a matter of a few weeks after the strike by Allied workers at the Kingsport Press began, the impact of the strike was felt well beyond the border of the volunteer state. As the days and weeks of the bitter strike turned into months and years, the test of strength also became the test of endurance. At 6 a.m. on March 11, 1963, about 1,650 production and maintenance employees of the Kingsport Press went on strike against their employer. The collective bargaining talks, which had continued since the previous December 1st, centered on the typical kinds of issues: a wage increase, reduction of the work week, seniority, and the manning of the equipment. Wages constituted the main issue of the strike, and the Kingsport workers noted that their wages were about 20% below the industry's norm. Acme Boot Manufacturing Company was a big deal in Clarksville for 66 years. They produced children's shoes and sandals until 1935, and then morphed into Acme Boots. Headquartered in Clarksville, Tennessee, Acme Boots became the largest manufacturer of cowboy boots in the country, and retained that status until the mid-1980s. On May 13, 1974, the United Rubber Workers Union Local 330 went on strike to seek better wages and better employment benefits. On May 21, 1993, Acme Boot closed all operations in the United States and moved to Puerto Rico. Although Tennessee has a vast history of workers' organizing, there is one event that not only changed the future of organized labor, but had a significant impact on the civil rights movement as well. The Memphis sanitation strike began on February 11, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, citing years of poor treatment, discrimination, and dangerous working conditions. On February 1st, Ethel Cole and Robert Walker were crushed to death in a garbage compactor where they were taking shelter from the rain. 2 other men had died this way in 1964, but the city refused to replace the defective equipment. On February 12th, hundreds of workers came to a meeting at the Memphis Labor Temple. Furious with their working conditions, the workers left the meeting with no organized plan, but a feeling that something had to be done immediately. That following Monday, 1,300 black sanitation workers walked off the job in protest. They also sought to join the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Memphis Mayor Henry Loeb declared the strike illegal and refused to meet with local black leaders. The coalition brought in support from labor, religious, and community groups. And with all the national attention this event brought forward, it naturally caught the attention of Dr. Martin Luther King.
You are demanding that this city will respect the dignity of labor. So often we overlook the worth and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages.
On Friday, March 29th, some 300 sanitation workers and ministers marched peacefully and silently from the Claiborne Temple to City Hall. Escorted by armed personnel carriers, jeeps, large military trucks, and dozens of guardsmen with fixed bayonets. The workers marched from their union hall to a meeting place at the city council chamber. They were met with 40 to 50 police officers. Loeb led the workers to a nearby auditorium where he asked them to return to work. They laughed and booed him, then applauded the union leaders who spoke. At one point, Loeb grabbed the microphone from organizer Bill Lucy and shouted, "Go back to work," storming out of the meeting soon after. The workers declined. On Sunday, March 31st, ministers urged Dr. King to cancel his trip back to Memphis to lead another peaceful march. When Dr. King returned to Memphis, he addressed a rally and delivered his historic "I've been to the mountaintop" speech.
Thank you very kindly, my friends. As I listen to Ralph Abernathy and his eloquent and generous introduction, and then thought about myself, I wondered who he was talking about. It's always good to have your closest friend and associate to say something good about you. And Ralph Abernathy is the best friend that I have in the world. I'm delighted to see each of you here tonight in spite of a storm warning. You reveal that you are determined to go on anyhow. Something is happening in Memphis, something is happening in our world. And you know, if I was
The day after he gave this speech, Dr. King was assassinated by James Earl Ray as he stood outside on the balcony of his room at the Lorraine Hotel. On April 8th, Mrs. King and dozens of national figures led a peaceful memorial march in downtown Memphis in tribute to Dr. King and in support of the strike. On Tuesday, April 16th, the union leaders announced that an agreement has been reached. The Memphis sanitation workers voted to accept it, and the strike was over. Throughout the history of Tennessee, workers have always banded together in times of need, as shown through the state's colorful history. The picture of organized labor is quite different today. Union leadership is changing. A new generation is rising. Many in the new generation of leadership have not experienced the trials and battles of hard times. Their thinking will likely be different. Not wrong, just different.